The service at Faith Baptist Church was lovely. The melodious tones of hymns and the genuine joy in the air reminded Elise of the church she attended with Grandma Mona back in Jamaica. It felt like home. Elise was smitten by how good an orator Pastor Rick was. The confidence he exuded and the love and respect his church members showed him were admirable. I wonder if he's fawned over because of his kindness or his position. Ruth Ross was a quieter woman. She only spoke when spoken to, but the smile on her face seemed permanent. Elise's first weeks at the Rosses' house had been very smooth and comfortable. She didn't do much work except on days when they had to plan dinners or other social events for Pastor Rick's associates. On those days, Elise paid proper attention and focused on every aspect of the business. In a short time, she could do everything perfectly without supervision from her boss. On our way back from church, I sat in the back of the car as the Rosses spoke with each other, going over the events of the week.
Do you think we should have accommodated John and his antics?
Elise couldn't help but be drawn by his voice. She diverted her attention from people walking on the sidewalks and looked up at the rearview mirror, her gaze colliding with Pastor Rick's. She kept looking. Why not? That man is just going about his normal business. With or without pranking, he is just looking for his daily humor.
What do you think about John, Elise? What do you mean you don't know? You are not really accommodating when he comes around. We feel the same way about John, Elise. I don't know.
Leave the girl alone, Ruth. John will always play his funny pranks and we will always accommodate him. Not when he puts a dead rabbit outside my door to scare me.
John was the guy who came from time to mow the lawn. Although he was hard-working, his pranks could be toned down a little bit. That particular morning, Elise had awoken to Ruth's sharp scream. Rushing down, thinking it was an emergency, they all met a pale Ruth in front of the door with a dead rabbit dangling above her. John came out from hiding and burst out laughing. Ruth joined them in laughing, but not before she chased John around with a mop. It was indeed a funny sight. Their day started early. Elise and Ruth went shopping to get some baby items in preparation for the baby's arrival.
Ruth had told her it was a girl. They moved from section to section, admiring the cute baby clothes on display at the store's baby department. I am so glad, Elise. I can't wait to carry this bundle of joy in my arms. I'm also happy you'll be here to see me through it.
As I am too, Ma. Elise was indeed happy.
I am feeling really generous. How about we treat ourselves to some clothes shopping afterward?
Oh, I've sent the money I made back home. I can't afford clothes.
As I said, I'm feeling generous, so the bill's on me.
Elise made sure she sent money every month to Grandma Mona. The little she made was enough to cater to her grandma's needs back in Montego Bay. Grandma had no phone, so she went to the Clarks whenever she wanted to speak. At first, Elise started by sending letters, but they took too long. She made a mental note to call her as soon as she got home. But first, she sent a message to Mrs. Clark, letting her know she would be calling later in the evening. Grandma, I'm good. How have you been faring? Hope you've been taking your medications and going to the hospital regularly. Elise. Bless you, Elise. How are you, child? Do Raymond and Simone still come over? Yes, of course. Thank you for the money you sent, my dear. How are your bosses? Stay good and true to them. May God bless them too.
Of course, they always do. I gave the gifts you sent over to them, but we didn't know you'd call today. They would have been here. They check on me frequently. We are all good.
Elise knew she was pregnant. Her heart thudded heavily. She had missed her period for 3 consecutive months. She knew there was trouble. Elise dared not mention this to Ruth, especially not when Ruth was due to give birth at any moment. She couldn't give room for panicking because Ruth would know. Elise determined to hide the pregnancy till further notice. She thought of lots of plans before settling on that. First, she had thought about saving up enough money before running away. She could go to a neighboring state, far away from Parkland. Georgia wasn't a bad idea, but she didn't have enough to start a new life in a new town. Or she could tell Ruth the truth and resolve the issue. That wasn't smart because she hadn't spent a year in Florida, and she hadn't made enough money to last her and her responsibilities. What would her grandma say? Elise settled on making money for the months before her stomach would begin to protrude. She had to find a way to keep the pregnancy hidden till then. A few weeks passed, and Ruth Ross gave birth to a baby girl. The mood in the house was joyful, and everything was busy. Elise had extra errands to run and more things to plan. This was beneficial to her because she gained a whole lot. They had planned a huge get-together to welcome the presence of little baby Ross. Whenever they planned events, Ruth made sure to pay Elise a token for her services. Tips came in from visitors, both from church and those working together with Rick. Speaking of Rick, Elise noticed how he slid in and out of rooms in the house with his face radiating with joy. He didn't seem to notice her throughout, hardly acknowledged her presence. Elise walked in on the new parents talking one day.
She looks just like you, Ruth. Her eyes remind me of the first time I set my eyes on you. Do you remember?
How could I possibly forget, huh? It was in that warm shed that barely accommodated anyone while that rain fell. I'm so glad I decided to go get fries despite the threatening weather that afternoon.
Pastor Rick dropped his head and they both kissed. Elise noticed her throat itch, so she forced out a cough to clear it. That made the couple detach while giggling. Ruth waved at her, but Rick said nothing. Instead, he continued cooing and admiring his baby. Elise dropped the napkin with Ruth. "Hey, Ruth, I'd like to get some nuts nearby. Do you need anything from the store, Ruth?" She didn't have any nuts to buy. She just needed space to reflect on her life. She wanted the breeze to clear her head and relieve herself of the burden in her chest. As she walked on the walkway, she sighted little kids playing around. Some were coming from school with friends and some with their parents. She saw a little girl in pigtails with lollipops in her hands. She waved at Elise and Elise waved back. Subconsciously, she placed her right palm on her stomach. Her baby was growing, but she had no safe plan to bring it into the world. Instead, she was in fear.